thank you everyone so much for participating in our month-long webinar series called Adaptation, which is a webinar series dedicated to helping you get through these really challenging times by giving you the practical tools needed to not only survive, but also to thrive in the months ahead. So we've done this by participating with experts in the field, like ours today here, and today is the second webinar in our series. But before I get started and introduce our speaker, I just wanted to remind everyone about a couple of things. So the first is that this session will be about an hour in length, including about a 10 to 15 minute Q&A session at the end. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation in the Q&A box or in the chat box below throughout the presentation, and then we'll get to all of them at the end. All sessions will also be recorded, and you will receive the recording along with the slides by the end of this week. All right, now with that, I'd like to introduce and extend a very warm welcome to our speaker, Mary Joyce. She is the founder and principal of Do Big Good, and the title of her session today is Impact Cascades, the Adaptive Approach to Evaluation. All right, thank you so much for joining us today, Mary. It wasn't too long since we had you here last, so welcome back. And with that, Mary, I guess I'll pass it off to you now if you want to start sharing your screen.
Awesome, will do. Hello, everyone, as I flip over to my slides. Yeah, so it's great to see everyone. I do want to do a little disclaimer, which is that this is a similar presentation to the one I did last time, but there was so much technical difficulty with the last presentation that I thought I would do it again. And I will say that there's a new tool that I'm going to be introducing, but if things look similar, if the example is familiar, then that is why. So I did want to just let you know, I'll know that. Okay, so yes, as Mel said, I'm Mary Joyce, and I'm the founder of Do Big Good. We're a firm that measures social change, and we are based in Seattle. So I am interested just to take a moment, if you'd like to, in chat, of what brings you here. What are you interested in learning in this session? And let's see if I can. Mel, how can I see chat when I am in present?
Good question. If you have two screens, you can just pop one over to the other screen, and if not, I don't know if people will be able to see if you move the chat over.
Okay, well maybe Mel, could you just read some out as you see? Oh, I see, someone said something. It popped up when someone wrote something. Okay, yeah. All right.
So
okay, better evaluation. Want to be able to make campaigns more effective. All right. Anyone else? Okay. How to evaluate. Okay, evaluate your programs, right? That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, that's something that takes a little bit less time. Awesome. Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, cool. So I guess another thing that I wanted to note is that we at Do Big Good are very interested in transforming the social sector and making it work better. And I think maybe a couple of weeks ago we had this idea of, you know, what's everything going to look like, you know, after this pandemic, right? And I think now we're realizing that it's going to be a very slow dial into something that is also going to be quite different than what we had before. So I've been thinking of how do we start doing now what we would like the future to look like. And at Do Big Good, we want to create a social sector where the edges lead, where persistent awareness replaces rigid plans, where rapid response to change is possible, and where transformation occurs. So hopefully you'll see those different values and goals in this method that we're going to talk about today. So how do we do this? At Do Big Good, we do client projects. From client projects, resources emerge that are public, and then we do trainings to actually scale the use of those resources, which is what you're experiencing right now. So today we're going to talk about a tool that we've created called the Impact Cascade, and this is the Impact Cascade. So it is a one-sheet model that we created to map, measure, and manage the path to social benefit. And we will be going through the process of filling one out in a lot of detail today. And you actually will have the opportunity to do a first pass at filling out an Impact Cascade for a project. So let's get into it. Just so you know, the different points we're going to be hitting on as we move through this process, we are going to be building different cascades that are additive. So the first cascade we're going to build is a narrative cascade, which is basically a theory of change that's descriptive of the different dependencies that are in your project or program. The second is that we're going to be laying metrics onto that theory of change. So those are countable observations. Then once we have metrics, we're going to be identifying KPIs or key performance indicators, and those are the most important metrics, right? So we're going to start off with a lot of metric options, but then really narrow into what is the metric that you really need to be measuring at each phase, because none of us have time to be measuring tons and tons of metrics. And then finally, we're going to talk about actually managing programs from the Impact Cascade, which is about putting in specific SMART goals that are tied to the metrics, and then deciding and adapting. So that is just an overview. If there are any questions about that, I'll just go into it then. So if you would like to fill out an Impact Cascade as we go, this is, Mel, can you drop that URL in the chat? Or Sam?
Yes.
Just because I know it's a little fussy to type from a screen. But this is a free spreadsheet tool that we've created, again, through a client project. And it's just a little bit more useful than trying to do all these different metrics on a slide. The slide is useful as a visual, but then to actually do the work, it's helpful to have a spreadsheet. Yeah, so if you navigate over to that, it's now in the chat, so you can copy and paste that link. I'll go over to the next slide. You're gonna see this. So if you would like to work along with us, or along with me as I go through the steps, you just click one of the example tabs at the bottom, and you just claim it by renaming it, and then you can fill in the cascade, your own cascade as we go through the phases. So do you want to just briefly, we'll just take a moment, Mel, to switch over to viewing that spreadsheet and see if it's clear to everyone.
All right, I switched it over. Let me know when you can see it.
Okay. Okay, so you've got about 20, yeah, over 20 people in here. So, yeah. So anyone, just one of the tabs that says example, you can just, maybe Mel, you can scroll down and show how to rename a tab, just to show people what to do to claim one.
Yeah, so I'm just right clicking, and then I'm just hitting duplicate. And so it duplicates down here, and then you can just double click and then type in your name down below here, like that.
Mm-hmm. And then if someone wants to claim 1 through 10, how would they rename that?
You just double click on, like, say, example 1, and then you would just type in your name. So just double click.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, thank you. And I will go back to my slides now. All right. Okay. So, all right. Awesome. So we're going to be working through the example with asylum seekers, asylees. And the first piece, as you may remember, is thinking about stakeholders. And this list of stakeholders is a little different. I made it a bit smaller and a bit more specific than last time. It used to be RASCI, which is a pre-existing stakeholder definition system. This one is more specific to the impact cascade. So we're thinking about the beneficiary, the bottom liner, the data collector, and the data reviewer. And who are those individuals? So the beneficiary is the person who's receiving an increase in well-being. The bottom liner is the person who's responsible for creating the cascade. The data collector is recording the information that you're identifying through the cascade, and the data reviewer is making decisions based on the information. So if you're in the spreadsheet and you want to think about who in your organization would fill those roles or who the program is, you can type those in. And just so you know, I'm on a single screen, so I cannot see if you're filling this in. Maybe Mel could be in charge of seeing if everything's working in there, if I need to pause or go more slowly. So for this, yeah.
I'm looking in here. Doesn't look like too many people are filling it out right now.
Okay, it's okay.
So they might just be, I guess, paying attention to what you're talking about.
That's fine. That's fine.
Possibly
Okay.
they'll do it later.
That's fine.
I also see people going into template section. So
just
the
kind
first
of
one.
Searching around in it.
Yeah.
Okay. I got kicked out, came back in, cannot see the link.
Mel will
repost it. So in this example, the stakeholders are asylees and those who support them. So the beneficiary is the asylee, is the asylum seeker. The bottom line, or the person creating the cascade, is you, we're assuming, because you're on this webinar. The data collector is an operations manager, and the data reviewer is the executive director of the organization. So this is the first, now that we have our stakeholders, and the stakeholders, in an ideal situation, you would be creating the cascade with these individuals on the same Zoom call or in the same room. Since obviously that's not happening now, these are people that you would want to check in with as you're creating drafts of the impact cascade. Say, hey, I was thinking you could play this role in this system. This is what I've come up with. What do you think, right? And obviously that does include also the beneficiary, right? So now that you have identified these individuals, we want to do a theory of change of your program. So just what are the different things that we're expecting and needing to happen? And this is a work backwards process. So we start with ultimate outcomes. What is the resulting change in beneficiary well-being? And for this example, we would say another way to say it is describing change in well-being your program will achieve for beneficiaries. In this example, it's that food insecure asylees are fed. So this is the program that this nonprofit that works with asylum seekers is doing. And then you continue your work backwards. Intermediate outcomes, what are the resulting behavior changes that precede this change in well-being? Another way to say that is, what do beneficiaries need to do to achieve this increase in well-being? And in this example, it's they're showing up and receiving meals. Moving one backward in time, outputs, what is the value delivered to beneficiaries that will then make those outcomes possible? Another way to state this is, what is the valuable product or service that your organization or program will create for beneficiaries? And in this case, again, a service delivery example, this is the meals. And there's one more step in just the narrative cascade: activities, actions to improve beneficiary well-being. And what do you need to do to create the valuable service or product? And as you can see from the graphic, it's cooking the food, right? So this is the first step of doing an impact cascade for evaluation. You are simply writing in descriptively, what is the theory of change for our program? What do we need to do? Then what is the value that will be delivered? what behavior change will occur because of this output we've delivered, and then because of this behavior change, what change in well-being will our beneficiaries receive. Are there any questions about the narrative cascade? So it's basically, yeah, doing a theory of change for your program. And I've gone through it very quickly, but I'll just pause for a second if there are any questions in chat. And then if there are not, I will continue. Ah, yes, the bottom liner. This is responsible. So in the Rasky model, it's the person who's responsible. To clarify, I said who is responsible for making the cascade. It might be also helpful to say who is responsible for the program, but I thought we'd say who is responsible for the cascade. Just making sure that it's created, making sure that, that roles are assigned, making sure that it, fits with the needs of all the stakeholders, things like that. Any other questions? Okay. So now we're going to add countable observations to the theory of change to create the metrics cascade. So as you see, the cascade looks a little different. Instead of these generic descriptions under each phase, like action and value and behavior change and well-being, we've actually put the descriptions from our narrative cascade into our cascade. So activities is now, oh, I'm sorry, that's a typo. It should be cooking food. Outputs is, I'm sorry about this. I hope it's correct on the future ones. The last two are correct. Asleys are receiving the meals and the food insecure asleys are fed. Let's see. When you're going to add in the observations for each phase. So for the activity of, this is cooking the food. So you have like the dishes are being cooked, you're buying ingredients, volunteers are working. As you're actually serving the food, the individual meals are being served. That's already a pretty visual example. For the intermediate outcome, as Sally's receiving the meals, you have, there are people in line, there are people that are eating. If you're thinking of physical facility, there may be people that are coming back, there may be people who are new. And then for the ultimate outcome of people being fed on an ongoing basis, you say, okay, they're eating a certain number of times, or they're eating for a certain period of time. So this is, again, we're still in the area of qualitative observation. And just to remember that a metric is just a countable observation. No more, no less. We're discrete units. We want to be looking for discrete units. So we're turning the observations, starting to turn them into numbers. So we're saying, if we're saying that food is being cooked, we can say, okay, what's a unit of measure for cooking food? Potentially it's pounds of food, right? What's a unit of measure for purchasing ingredients or having ingredients donated? Dollars, right? Or units of currency, right? If you have volunteers working, what's a unit of measurement for volunteers working? Maybe it's the hours, number of hours they're working, or the number of volunteers. Again, you're still basically in a brainstorm mode. The number of meals being served, you can actually count meals. You could count plates if you want, right? And then here for intermediate outcomes, they're all related to people. So it's like clients, it's a type of person, or repeat client is a type of person, new client is a type of person. And then in ultimate outcomes, you have things like visits, how many times a client is visiting over time. So these are all examples of metrics, of ways that you can turn your qualitative observations like cooking or volunteering or purchasing ingredients into metrics that you can track and evaluate. And then you want to, of course, make them time bound. Of course, I'm sure you all are familiar with SMART metrics. or SMART goals. And there's just one example here, thinking, is this something you measure per year, per week, per day, right? And this is true for all of the different phases. I just decided to put the example in that middle one because there was space on the slide. But every metric that you select would be specific by time. So now you have a metrics cascade, which is that every phase is linked to a range of countable observations. You have multiple options per phase. So are there any questions about the metrics cascade? So this was coming up with observations tied to what's happened, the theory of change, and then counting those observations. Are there any questions about that? And again, you can just put it in the chat. Okay, I will move along. So now we're going to do a KPI cascade, and KPI is key performance indicator. And this is the phase in which we decide which metrics you're actually going to collect data for, right? Because you're not going to collect data for all of them, particularly if there isn't an evaluation staff member in the organization. So there's your definition, key performance indicator. It's basically saying, of all of these metrics that are telling us how we're doing, which is most important. And the way that I define what is key or most important is something that is informative and is also feasible to collect. So it's really giving you information about what's happening in each phase. So what's happening in each phase is the things that you develop from your theory of change. So activity is cooking food, output is the meals, intermediate outcome, athletes receiving meals, and the ultimate outcome, food insecure athletes are fed. So we're saying, of all these ideas and metrics we came up with, which is actually telling us something really useful about what's happening in the program at that point, and then what's feasible for us to collect in terms of information. It's consistent with our technical capacities. It doesn't take too much time, right? And this is obviously a management decision, right? Deciding what is the key performance indicator for every phase. So I selected for each phase one. Obviously, if there's only one option, then that also becomes a key performance indicator. But if there were multiple ones, I decided which one I thought was giving us the most information and also was the easiest to collect. And yeah, so I said pounds of food cooked. It might actually be easier to measure dollars of food, since that's something that would already be tracked for budget. And athletes receiving meals, I decided that new clients, like really growing the amount of people served, that was particularly key because it was tied to that ultimate outcome as well of trying to feed these people in the community. Oh, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, key performance indicator is a really great concept, and often it's just very obscure and not described well. But if well defined, it's actually super, super useful. Thank you for the feedback. So now you have a KPI cascade. So this is a cascade where you only have one metric per phase. And which makes it, I would say, more likely that it'll actually be collected, and then more likely that it'll actually be used for management and for reporting and whatnot. So does anyone have any questions on KPI, the KPI cascade of selecting which metric to actually measure after you've done that brainstorming of the having a lot of metrics per phase? Anyone have any questions? Okay, I will move along. to the last phase of the process, which is the management cascade. And this is making decisions according to countable goals. So what we are doing here is we're using the KPIs to create targets at each phase. And a target is just the number or range that serves as a goal. So these are some examples. So where the activity is cooking food and the KPI is pounds of food, we're saying, okay, we want to be preparing at least 80 pounds of food a day. Output, where we're looking at meals, and our metric, our KPI metric is the number of meals served. We're saying at least 50. So here it's a range, right? It's not just, it's exactly 50. It's like, well, 50 is our lower bound. We want to be potentially higher than that, but let's make sure we're at least at 50. Intermediate outcome, this is a percent. It's getting a little bit fancier. So getting 5% new clients a week, I think that's probably a little ambitious. I might change that to a month, but you can also express a target as a percentage. And then this ultimate outcome is a range. So where the goal in the theory of change is local asylees are food secure, the target is between 60 and 80% of local asylees eat at least one meal per week this year with our facility. And we got to that extremely detailed metric by going through all the phases, right? We didn't have to come up with it from zero. Okay. So each phase has a metric-based target, is the impact management cascade. And then questions. So I'm going to read I see there's a chat question. Did you suggest this program and see how it applies to our education program? Okay. Help us share stories with our potential and current donors. Yeah, so I will say, what's the connection between this and storytelling? The impact cascade, even though I know that's not the question Patty asked, but I'll just talk about that. And then as I'm talking, if you have questions, you can type them in the chat. This is really about management. It's about actually increasing impact. And the goal of that is that because you're using an ongoing system, a system of persistent awareness to actually increase impact, you have more stories of impact to share. And then you can share those stories with donors, you can share those stories with volunteers. But the storytelling communications piece is separate than this piece. This is kind of a way of maximizing your impact stories. So that's the connection between the two of them. Are there any questions about this last phase? Fund development side. Yeah, so again, this is a system for, so is that fundraising? Does that have the same meaning as fund development? I assume it does. So I would say that, yeah. So this is a process of increasing impact. And then once you have that increased impact, you then use those stories and you use that evidence in fundraising, right? So if you have your metrics clear, you can report on those metrics saying, we've identified this goal of producing this much of whatever your output metric is, right? And then you could say, we've been able to increase that by 10%, or we've been able to increase that by 250, or whatever the number is. So you can report out on your results throughout the process. And I guess I would say that's a benefit to an evaluation system that only occurs at the end of a project, because then you're totally in the dark until the end. And then at the end, you're like, okay, let's see what happened. And then you need to make the best story you can. Whereas this is, you have more information throughout the process. You actually have more control over your final outcome and what the final evaluation would be. And you also are able to share throughout the process of, how much you're cooking, how many volunteers are working, how many meals are being served before you have the final outcome of how many people in the community are on an ongoing way having access to this resource. So thank you for that. I'll respond to Anna and then Zach. If you're building a new program with an unfamiliar demographic, is it best to measure by set percentages? Percentages is actually when you have a really good idea. The less you know, the more elasticity you should have in your goal. So if you know less about what your outcome is likely to be, I would use a range of some kind. So that could still be a percentage, but it would be like between 5 and 10% rather than like 5% exactly. Cause you know, you might not have the information to know what's a reasonable goal. And you can also change your goals as you progress. So you could say, well, let's make it 5%. And then as you're working, you could say, oh, this is harder than we thought. It's like 3, or this is easier than we thought. And say, oh, let's do 7. So you can change your goals for the following phase, you know, as you're working in the previous phase and seeing how hard or difficult it actually is to do what you're trying to do. Zach. So I have to leave the meeting. All right, bye, Zach. Okay. And so as I've been implying, where does adaptation fit in? If you're not meeting a target, you adapt. So let me just spend one more moment on that. So for example, if you would not be hitting a target about, you know, the amount of food that you're cooking, that was the first target. You'd say, okay, let's post something on our website that we need more donations. Let's reach out to local supermarkets and see if we can get more in-kind donations. You know, let's partner with a local church or religious institution to see if we can get them to raise money or collect food for us. So that is the goal, is that because you know how you're doing at each phase of a project, rather than only at the end, you actually do have the ability to adapt and change and fix as you're going, rather than only knowing at the end. And this is a summary in yellow and orange. So first you want to define who will help you fill out the impact cascade or review and revise it. So that's the stakeholders. Then working backwards, you describe your theory of change. So that's the narrative cascade. Then you add observations for each phase, count those observations, make them time bound. That's all the metrics cascade. You pick the metric that's most feasible and informative. That's your KPI. You add targets. That's your management cascade. And then from your management cascade, if you're not meeting a target throughout the cascade, then you can adapt your tactics to have more control of your outcomes later on. So that, I feel like we went through that very quickly. So again, there's also a link to those slides in the spreadsheet. And that's actually the end of the presentation. So I guess we're formally in Q&A now. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mary. That was absolutely fantastic. And we actually did have quite a few people fill out a tab of their own.
Oh, okay. Shall we? Yeah, let's flip over to that.
Yeah. 1 second.
And I will also say that this is public on the web. So if you do not want your example to be public, you can delete it at the end of the exercise. It would be really nice to have some public examples, but obviously want to protect your privacy if you would prefer not to have it be.
So yeah, there's a few at the bottom here.
Okay.
I don't know if they want it public.
Okay.
So I don't know if you wanted to go over it.
Okay, let's see.
There is a question that just came in as well.
Okay. I'm new to evaluation and monitoring. Do you know a free pro? Free pro is do you mean like a free professional individual to do the work? Oh, free pro, free accessible programs. You mean like an online course or something like that? Karine? Okay. I actually don't know. I don't know a free course because I have not personally taken free courses on this. I'm sorry, I don't know, maybe my guess is that there's other people in the course or in this webinar that may have some examples or advice for Karine. So if anyone does, I would encourage you to share in the chat how you learned how to do evaluation, or if you know online courses. I would say I do like this book very much. It's called Lean Impact. And this is basically this is the approach of collecting data throughout throughout a program and using that data to be adaptive throughout the program rather than just waiting to the end of a project to do evaluation. So that will give you a big picture sense of what I'm talking about, but it's not like a workbook where you have, precisely how to do everything. Okay, yeah, you're welcome, kidding. Yeah.
All right. So looking at the tabs, I don't know if we wanted to chat about that. So sure. It looks like Leah filled it out, Melissa filled it out, Sandra's filling it out.
Okay.
So we have a few people filling things out.
Oh, cool. Does anyone who filled it out want to share or ask a question? Okay, thanks, Deborah. Okay. Let's see. I mean, okay. When working on a funding proposal, what do you recommend including in the impact section out of all the info you shared today? So it depends really what the proposal is asking for. So usually they want, I guess if they want metrics, then you share the metrics. And if they want the theory of change, you share the theory of change. So I would say, you do the whole process so you know what you're doing from a management perspective, but then respond to what is requested. I guess, are you implying that, Marco, that the problem is that the proposal is just extremely vague? It just says, tell us your evaluation strategy. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, so I would say just it can be good to, you could share this table if you wanted, and then you would probably also be sharing, I would say, a narrative. Usually they ask for a narrative description of the evaluation, so you would kind of talk through what your theory of change is, and then you'd say these are the metrics we're using at each phase. That would be the minimum for me. So maybe, and you could also use the visual of the cascade, the boxes and arrows cascade, that is tying maybe your KPIs per section, with a description of why you chose them. But again, the best thing is to respond to what's specifically requested. Okay, you're welcome, Marco. All right. All right. Yes, Anna, Lean Impact is really great. It's my favorite book on this topic. It's my favorite book on evaluation. The only thing I disagree with about that book is it's very much about, scaling projects and making them huge, and that's the way to create change. And my opinion is that the best way to create change is to make every single agent in this change ecosystem more effective. So I would love for even very small nonprofits to be all doing this responsive approach to impact and participatory approach to impact, and measuring throughout the theory of change. Yeah. So if you sign up for our newsletter on our website, it's on our homepage at dobiggood.com. We send out a reading list in every newsletter. Another book that's a newer book is what is it called? Measuring Social Change. This one is more about case studies, but it's useful. What's another one? Oh, Design Justice is a cool new book. That's really about the participatory measurement. So it's if you're including your stakeholders and beneficiaries. Design Justice is a good book on how to do that in a inclusive, equitable, and empowering way. There's a book about KPIs called Measure What Matters. And that's all about KPIs. It's like, if you want to read about KPIs, that's the one. It's by one of the people who developed the system about how KPIs work. But yeah.
All right, I'll give it about a minute or two more
Yeah.
for questions as they come in. And while we're waiting on that, I will just talk about our next session that's happening. So I'm just going to share my screen. Yeah, so the next webinar that we have is going to be next week, or sorry, not next week, next Thursday. So this Thursday, May 14th at 10 a.m. PST or 1 p.m. EST, and it will be Amy Eisenstein, and so she's coming from the Capital Campaign Toolkit, and she'll be presenting her session that's titled How to Engage Donors and Raise Emergency Funds During the COVID-19 Crisis. If you haven't already registered for that, we'll also pop it in the comments there so you can sign up. And also just a reminder that today's today's session will be recorded, and you'll receive the recording along with the slides and all of Mary's resources. So all of the links to all of her cascades that she gave to us, they'll also be included. Mary, was there anything else that you wanted to include in that email that's going to go out?
No, I think that's it. So just, yeah, the video, the slides, and then the spreadsheet, probably.
Perfect.
That would be it.
I'm not sure. There might have been another chat that came in. Oh, yeah. Just thank you for the book suggestions.
You're welcome, Michelle. Thank you.
And then, yeah, Sam plopped in there the link to the next presentation or webinar that will be this Thursday. So we're very excited to have you there. And I don't see any more questions coming in. I think we'll just end a little bit early today, but that was jam-packed with a ton of information. So no worries that it went a little bit shorter today. You were also answering questions throughout. So fair enough that there wasn't as many questions at the end. But I just wanted to thank you again, Mary, so much for you coming today. It was really a pleasure to have you, and I'm really hoping that you gave a lot of valuable insights for everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. And yeah, I think you have my email address. If you want to get in touch, I'll just put it in the chat. Because I know that was a lot. So if you want to follow up, I'd be happy to do stuff. Yes, Michelle, you absolutely can. Yeah. Yeah, thank you everyone. Okay.
Perfect. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and we'll see you on Thursday.
Yep. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.